Hi, my name is Vuk and I'm the host of the Change podcast, where we introduce you to people and ideas shaping MENA region.
2020 brought us something that nobody expected. I think everyone was super excited about the year and then slept.
Yeah.
And I read this morning that around 900,000 people will lose their jobs in UAE only. Around 10% of population decrease. Losing the job, how that impacts one person.
That's a big one, man. That's a big one. That's a very big one. So the thing is that we as humans, we have a system in our brain that tracks our social status, which runs on serotonin, right? So when you lose a job, you lose your social status in a way, right? Because you are not where you had anticipated to be within the structure of society. You suddenly lose the ground below your feet and you look down and it's empty, there's nothing there to hold you. So people who lose their jobs can definitely feel this, can have this feeling of being lower in society, of being lower to the expectations of society. And this is not something to take lightly, because lower levels of serotonin means that you are more prone to stress, you are more prone to illness. Low levels of serotonin have been coupled with cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and anxiety, depression, and so many other diseases, right? So losing a job and losing what is perceived as the social status is something unbelievably damaging and can be traumatic, right? So what we need to know around this domain, right, is that the single most effective thing that can hold us in situations like this is a strong social circle around us.
What can we expect in the coming years when it comes to technology in UAE? You already said that we are pretty advanced, but people are not using that much. And what are some expectations that we can have in the next 3 to 5 years in UAE?
I believe the telemedicine as a whole is going to be changed. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind that we are still not utilizing the telemedicine as it is being utilized abroad, in Europe and in the United States. We still have restriction to e-prescriptions that has to be done from a physician who is licensed and based in the UAE. So we don't have that e-prescriptions from any consultation that done online internationally. So I think there will be a lot of maturities toward the regulation of telemedicine in the coming few years, if not soon, within few months. So, because I'm sure that the health authorities within the UAE are looking more into that perspectives, because this is something that we have seen. Also keeping in mind that UAE has pursued the medical tourism. So there will be a lot of international patients who are actually wanting to utilize a lot of these platforms internationally. So it's going to open a lot of areas, channels, and directions into that perspective, which hasn't been practicing before.
Building if perfectly that there is such thing, customer experience is an art, and every business is different, every environment is different, especially when we're talking about huge corporate, which is a very complex system where you need to put all people to work together. Okay, you got it, maybe I got it, I understand, but how to make the whole team understand, whole company understands it, and then execute it. I think that's one of your roles now, right?
This is a huge topic that you're touching, because that's one of the main difference between the big organization and the small organization like fintechs, for example, right? we are collaborating a lot with the fintechs. I call it fintech teams because for me are startup teams.
When you say fintech, what do you mean by fintech?
I mean teams, little small startups that are creating financial products in the space of the banking industry and financial industry. In my experience, one of the main difference between the two kind of organization, I mean, the classic, the traditional bank, the big bank is a big organization. These are small team, very small, very focused. The point is where are focused on? Because these small teams, they are creating quickly products that fix a specific force or problem in the market.
Niche.
The way in which they are doing it is like a startup. They are living on their products. They are extremely focused on the customer experience to delight the customer.
How do you define innovation?
For me personally, it's about taking something and elevating it and adding a little bit of a different flavor to it. In an initial sense, it's not for me going out and coming up with something completely off the wall.
Yeah.
I don't think in a corporate sense that level of pivoting. You know, if you're in a startup, you pivot and you can maybe pivot your fundamentals quite substantially. You can't do that in a corporate sense.
Yeah.
So for me, it's how do we take something and elevate it that wasn't there before, that wasn't thought about in that way, and that may be something as simple as the process behind it. That could be something as simple as using design thinking in an organization that's been doing the same processes for the last 15 years. And that to me is innovation, or getting the business to drive their own change initiative with some of the principles and the methodologies that we promote. That to me is innovation.
Yeah.
That is a different kind of innovation, I think, to, as I say, a startup proposition.
What changed in the market in sense of demand for e-commerce?
Yeah. So the first thing that changed, of course, is the demand. We were in lockdown. I think 95% of the world was in lockdown. So at some point, there was a place in the world, probably there's still a place in the world where the only way you can actually buy something is online. So the demand grew, and by the growth of the demand, I think what happened is people who never bought online, consumers who never bought online, they were forced to. And that's why there was this spike, because again, I'm not number guys.
Yep.
But if you look, all the stats are telling us, yes, there's been a growth in e-commerce. And one is that, and then you got all the numbers from like 200%, 200%, so depending on who's running the research and what the end purpose of the research. But for sure it grew. But if you look in depth, I think what is really important is you got the growth of certain categories that were really small at the beginning.
Really?
The first one is grocery. If you look at this region, I think it grew, times 40%. I don't know how much, but a lot. And if you look at what's happening, even the bigger players like, Carrefour and Lulu and all of them, they really saw this kind of spike. I mean, of course, then this InstaShop and then all the different grocery places. This is a shift in consumer habit, which is probably going to stay. So I think that's where the difference comes, because lockdown was an emergency. So of course, lockdown was good for everyone doing e-commerce. And then again, I probably need to talk a bit more about that. But let's assume that, because it was not, but let's assume it was good for a big majority of companies doing e-commerce. But again, for some, the most important data for me is that most of these companies, they actually acquire new clients, which they should, and they will probably be able to actually maintain.
I was super amazed with the amount of technology that is behind the service that we are receiving, that is not visible to the patient. Usually from the perspective of the patient, I come in, I get the treatment, usually interact with the doctor. They told me what's my diagnosis, they give me the treatment, I go to the pharmacy, I buy my medicines, and I go home. While in the background, there is so many of the systems that are in place to supplement the decision making the doctors are facing, right?
That's true.
What are, like, some of the backbone systems behind the one healthcare service provider that you would emphasize as the key technology stacks behind the service?
If we are talking about the integration, what does that mean? That we connected the component of technology all together.
So all of the pieces of technology to communicate between each other and work seamlessly.
Yes. We have the algorithm, how we can do this. We have the knowledge from the clinical, where we connected we have the technology and the technology resources. We connect all together to make sure that the data flow is easy between all this component and come up with ideas and solutions to the healthcare provider. Many people also are using the big data and big data analysis to identify, for example, the risk factor for one of the admissions or the readmission factor, whether it would be high, low, how we can eliminate this readmission if someone is about to discharge from the hospital or the facility, and there is a high risk factor that he will be admitted again to the hospital because there is a gap on the workflow. There is a big data analysis done and prediction is done on the existing data to identify this ailment. There is also AI and machine learning.
Can you describe me what can we expect when it comes to real estate, and what are some of the trends that we will see going forward when it comes to, you talked about residential and the commercial and how this whole game will change. Is it going to change?
I think it would not really change for residential. For commercial, because the consumer behavior will change, so the businesses will have to change that. And when a business changes, commercial real estate automatically adapts to that. Now, what would that look like? It's difficult to say. Maybe we would have different kinds of spaces. Maybe the office behavior will change. For instance, it's entirely possible that 2 years from now, when you go to your office building, the lift opens and it takes you to the floor where you want to go without any human interference. So the commercial real estate will have a new experience, but overall it would exist. It doesn't die down.
Yeah. Would you say that this kind of just accelerated the process of transformation that we were already on?
So you know more about me on this topic, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You are currently holding a position of data-driven culture lead.
Yes.
For all of the humans out there, what is exactly a data-driven culture, first of all?
Data-driven culture is making sure that no matter how much someone tells you, I have a hunch, you ask them, but where's the data to support it? So data-driven culture is almost to say, in fundamentally it's to say what my business does and what business decisions get made are made because there's data that supports that decision making. So it's almost to democratize data. Everybody that needs data has access to data and then makes decisions on the basis of that data.
Why does that matter?
Well, because you are in an increasingly competitive space. Customers want hyper-personalization. You can't serve customers today on a hunch because you might just get it terribly wrong.
What kind of data are we talking about in real estate? What kind of data are you collecting at all? What kind of data are you using?
Okay, that's an interesting question. It's one we ask ourselves a lot as well. So naturally, some industries lend themselves more easily to data collection. E-commerce, for instance. I have a customer, I know how much time that customer spends on a web page. I know what kind of search words is that customer using. I know what he or she has added to their cart. So the data points at you're generating very valuable data at every step, and it almost always gets used in e-commerce. With real estate, it's not as obvious. One, it's an infrequent industry, it's heavy involvement, and it's largely still a physical industry.
So I'm curious to know, so you are mentioning in your article that you wrote wake surfers and disruptors, and now we're talking about wake surfers. What made them ready for this comparing to the others?
Well, actually, in the article, I speak about two types of enterprises, of emerging enterprises, which will benefit hugely from this pandemic and from this wave of transformation and digital innovation. Type A is these emerging companies which already existed and were there trying to do something and already servicing the businesses in the market through providing them with IT services, for example, or helping them with the digital transformation, or selling digital services or products to them. So these enterprises are already in the field and they already have their networks and so on and their products. So this this wave came in to impose a certain reality and to impose certain needs for digital transformation. So
they surfaced up as more relevant than ever.
As more relevant than others, and they took advantage of the infrastructure they already had in place, of the platform they already had in place, of the expertise they already had in place, to bring out new products and new services and to service more and more these businesses in need for such digital innovative services. So this is type A, and we've seen it today in the article. I wrote it in March, so it was in the beginning of the pandemic, and it was kind of a prediction of how things can move on. And today, after a couple of months, we can see that these companies have really benefited.
The whole idea about trading seems very exciting for a lot of people, and I think it's based on my circle of friends as something where people feel very confident stepping in, but not a lot of people actually make a lot of success. And as you said, trading is more factual than more based on facts than on the assumptions, right?
Yeah,
and one can burn fingers if they try to play it on the feeling, right?
Exactly. I mean, a big mistake that a lot of people do, especially in the beginning, is going with the herd.
Yes.
And if you go with the herd, that's when you get kind of broken, right?
Yeah,
that's when you walk into a mess.
Yeah.
Because also Warren Buffett once said that if you invest in something that's popular, don't expect to do well.
Yeah.
And because during those times of markets becoming hype, that's the time actually to get out of those markets, right? Because at that time, it's just way too late. I mean, if you, for example, look at Bitcoin in the year of 2017, 2018, everybody was saying, well, let's buy Bitcoin at $20,000 because it's going to go up to $100,000. I mean, no, I mean,
didn't happen.
It didn't happen. It may happen eventually.
Yeah.
It may happen 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
But these kind of exaggerated market moves are usually not sustainable. It's gravity. What comes up has to come down eventually.
Did you notice the growth in the number of established now companies or startups since the whole crisis started? And how does this
they call
affected?
Me on a daily basis?
Yeah?
So no, literally everyone is now becoming
aware.
We tell everyone they should do that though.
Yeah.
Obviously putting your brand within amongst all the other brands.
Yeah.
You're drawing kind of probably the credibility of your own product. Although you might get a number of sales, you got to look at the longevity of do you get to own your customer? Is your customer then, are you going to have that relationship with them going forward? And where do you see this in 5 years, 6 or 7 years? And probably now speak to me, I'm now looking at the long-term picture of companies like this and how they can be established. And
it depends, right, on the type of the company, the size of the company, number of transactions, how strong your brand is.
But then it's when you look at products that don't have a shelf life, or it's not even that they have shelf life, the company is based on, so say a subscription-based company.
Yeah.
We love a subscription-based company. They know exactly
So subscription-based company is the type of business where I subscribe to a certain product that is being delivered to me once a month, once a week, or
and there's certain products that always, groceries will always have to be done like that. Baby care, certain products and that will always have to be done every month. And same for even people grooming and things like that. It's the same thing. And we have a few companies like that, and they know exactly how much product to put in the warehouse at every given time, which reduces their storage costs. And then after that, we know exactly how many orders are going out at that time. We might be left with 4 or 5 extra pieces.
Wow.
And they're just
There's
so
optimization to
conscious of
maximum,
it.
yeah.
Exactly, they're maximizing the profits from that.
We're going to switch topic to workforce enablement, and you said that it's a key pillar to digital transformation, or if we remove the word digital, just transformation. Can you explain to our listeners, first of all, what is workforce enablement, and then second, why is it important?
Excellent. Now, Vuk, you are asking about one of the topics that I am really passionate about it.
Okay, that is the goal.
Excellent. In fact, in the past 18 years of my experience, if there is one conclusion I found is knowledge is the main driver of success.
Mm-hmm.
Personal development is the main driver of success. And by success, I mean a sustainable success, not an accidental success. I understand meeting with a billionaire that will hand you 2 million will make you accidentally successful. But after a few years, maybe that 2 million will not exist. However, if you build your knowledge progressively and sustainably in area that is required by the marketplace, you will be sustainably successful. And in fact, there is a quote from Jim Rohn. He was saying, I found a direct correlation between my bank account and my personal development. The more I developed myself, the more my bank account grew. And it grows from a sustainable curve.
Can you kind of point out differences between education 30, 40, 50 years ago and education today, especially here in the region?
Yeah. So so education has started as a system to generate knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about Cambridge, Oxford, the Italian universities in the 11th century. So the idea is to produce scholars, professors, to contribute to knowledge, to advance knowledge, etc. Maybe with capitalism, with the Industrial Revolution, we wanted to have university to produce skills useful for production, useful to contribute to the economy. So today, I think we are well beyond that. We want higher education institutions to directly contribute to the economy.
Mm-hmm.
So creating skills is not sufficient. It's a big challenge. So I was a few months ago in a conference in Belgium, and there was the VP of HR of Airbus, and he was saying that in the next few months he needed like 10,000, I can't remember the exact number, but like 10 or 20,000 new employees or new engineers with certain skills, and didn't know where to recruit them because universities were not producing them. So what they are doing, most of these big corporations, they are retraining people. So I think producing graduates with the right set of skills is a priority number one. But actually what is happening here in the UAE is something that is a bit beyond that. So we want higher education institutions to be a direct contributor to the economy. So we want our graduates to become entrepreneurs. We want them to create SMEs. We want them to have a real impact on the GDP of the country. So this is very new and is something that is not, I haven't seen it in other places, certainly not in the US or in Europe, in such a well-defined way. It's quite unique.
So, I started innovation before Facebook
exactly.
and iPhone.
that's a completely different era.
Yes.
What changed when it comes to innovation from 2010, something like that, when you were starting and today?
It's very interesting because I think my mom and dad have a better idea of what I do now than they had before. Because when I started talking about innovation, companies were, and bear in mind, that's like more than 10 years ago and in Brazil. So the focus of companies was quality, process, project. So the hype of the moment was to be a PMI, to be a project management manager certified, or to be modeling processes, or to be in a total quality department. So we had departments for those things, and those departments, they don't exist anymore because those things have been embedded in the way we do things. But for innovation, it was the pressure to innovate in the market was lower and slower. So you didn't have this notion that a company needed to reinvent itself every 5 years.
How do you define innovation? What's innovation for you?
Interesting question.
I'm
very glad that
I'm looking for an interesting answer.
I'm very happy that you actually kick it off with that kind of question, because like you said, if you Google the word innovation definition, right? So you will end up with hundreds, if not thousands, of different definitions. But having been in this innovation field, I came into a conclusion and understanding that innovation is really a multidisciplinary process to create something new in a new way in order to deliver new values to the stakeholders.
When you say multidisciplinary, what are you referring to?
Yes, so I'm going to try to dive into several keywords there. So multidisciplinary, new ways, new values. And
unpack
stuff.
This for us.
Exactly. I will unpack that for you. So first, multidisciplinary. What does that mean? Innovation management or innovation process is not a standalone. If you try to set up an innovation function in the organization, don't think that it will actually run by itself. Because in order for you to be able to benefit from your innovation function within organization, the innovation function needs to collaborate and engage other functions within the organizations, namely finance department. They're the one who's going to
be the
give you a go ahead or reject your ideas, right?
Yeah.
With your proposition. And then supply chain, for instance, right? Marketing, sales, those people were actually close to the customers to get the insights from the customers. So it's really like a multidisciplinary engagement and process.
Thank you so much. Great questions, great conversation.